We had a question from the audience that I'd love to ask you. It ties right into this. Do you think we'll see a shift in wine production and popularity of certain regions due to climate change? And I'll add on to that. How do you think that'll affect Ontario and Canada more broadly?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're kind of blessed here in Ontario because we're already considered cool climate.
Mhm.
So a little bit more heat is going to be okay. In fact, we have some varietals that won't even make it through the winter here, like Syrah. It just can't stand the coldness.
Right.
What you are seeing in the hotter regions is they're just getting hotter, of course, and they're really struggling. So I remember Oregon, for example, was a place that always made high quality Pinot Noir, but now they're getting really, really hot there. And so they're struggling. So I do think that slowly by slowly there'll be a shift into higher altitude,
Okay.
right? Where you have a larger diurnal fluctuation. And in more emerging regions, I think are going to be a big thing, like places here like Georgian Bay and up north or Quebec. We looked at people like they had 5 heads a few years ago, and now it's starting to make a little bit more sense.
Got you. So we might see an expansion of the footprint of where we can grow wine well in Canada.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And then
Something
some
interesting,
traditional regions. Yeah, sorry,
sorry,
please go
sorry,
ahead,
Kimberly.
Priya.
Something interesting that you will notice if you go to visit the wineries because you live in the county. If you
I
go visit
do.
them in the winter, you'll see that something unique that we have to do in the county here is bury the vines because it gets so cold. So they don't have to do
Right.
that so much in Niagara because they're kind of in a little pocket of warmth. But in the county, it gets so cold that they have to bury up the bottom of the vines and then dig them out every spring. So it's just adds so much more manual labor to it. But another thing about climate change, I think that in a different way to answer that question is that a lot of wineries around the world are really switching to sustainable practices, to organic practices, and to vegan friendly practices. So there is definitely a shift because winemakers are obviously they're farmers first and foremost. So they're noticing the effect that climate change is having. And we're
Right.
actually going to be kicking off New Zealand's Organic Wine Week, talking about vegan friendly wines and wine pairings because they are really leaders in this
Mhm.
in this part of in this kind of trend of winemaking is just sustainability and organics and earth friendly.
Amazing.
We like to call it earth friendly winemaking because all of those sustainable, biodynamic, organic, they're all their own things and none of them means vegan, but they're all kind of earth friendly.
Definitely, definitely. And I love the thoughtfulness. And it is a trend, but I hope it's one that's here to stay for sure. I love seeing a greater percentage of the pie of wines available to us here being, biodynamic, organic, vegan, of course. It's amazing to see. And so I hope this is definitely an earth-friendly trend that lasts in this sector. So circling
Sorry,
back
Kimberly, I'm
through,
going to say one quick thing on
please
biodynamic
do,
because
please
I
do.
know there are a lot of people think biodynamic is great, and it is. It's a really cool kind of type of farming that follows the phases of the moon and considers the winery as a whole ecosystem. However, if you are buying biodynamic wine, make sure you find out whether one of the practices that they use in biodynamics is cow preparation number 55 or something like that, where they bury a cow horn into the soil. But also they often use things like ducks or other animals to eat the insects off the vine so that they don't have to
I
spray,
see.
which is great. Just ask them what they do with those sheep or ducks after the end of the season, because sometimes you might not
Absolutely.
like the answer for people who want their wines to be super vegan.
And this is an extraordinary tip. And thank you so much for the education because I had no idea that burying a horn was part of biodynamic production. I had just gotten as far as phases of the moon and a holistic approach. So really, really appreciate that, Priya. Thank you so much. And for everyone that's listening, did you know that? Did you know that they were fattening up ducks? My goodness. Anyway, so returning to our conversation about seasonality, this is also the season for veggies. And as a vegan, that's very exciting for me. So we've got cruciferous vegetables, we have eggplants, we have some summer squash, some fruit, field tomatoes. Are there any food and wine pairings or seasonal dishes that Priya and Jen, you could recommend for us to sort of make the most of the bounty of the season?
I would say, and I am curious to hear what Jen would say, I would say it's not necessarily about the specific vegetable as much as it is about how you prepare it. So if you're going to smoke it, if you're going to barbecue it, if you're going to put it in a sauce, if you're going to bake it, it really depends on the method of preparation, not specifically on the actual vegetable. Like tomatoes, for example, if you're going to have a bruschetta with really strong raw garlic, that the wine pairing is probably going to be different than if you're going to, cook those tomatoes into a sauce for 2 hours.
Yeah, I think,
Brilliant.
cooking method plays a big role in how the end vegetable tastes, right? As you know.
Right.
And of course, then what you marinate it in or dress it with also plays a huge role. So it's a little bit more complex than that. But I would say here's a fun thing. We were talking about this earlier that you could do with all this beautiful stuff coming in is color matching.
Yeah.
So you talked about
fun.
tomatoes, right? So break out the rosé when you're working with tomatoes, and with something like a pumpkin or a squash, that beautiful orange color. I would say, why not try an orange wine with it? So one of my favorite orange wine pairings is to pair it with pumpkin soup.
Sorry, my ring light just went out. Please continue.
Yeah, so you can have fun with it in that way. And I would say also maybe think about seasonality with your wines too, right? So we're still in rosé season for as long as just because you can't wear white anymore doesn't mean you can't drink rosé. So yeah,
I love the orange wine idea because color matching is a style of wine pairing that is not as well known, but it's kind of fun and kind of cool. So it's really interesting to think of, if you're going to have a cream sauce, a cashew cream sauce, probably you're going to pair that with a white wine and not with a heavy red. Just like if you're having a really nice marinara sauce, you're probably going to pair that with a red sauce, a red wine, and not a white wine. So color matching is kind of an interesting way to approach pairing.
That's awesome. And something that I've never heard of before. So I'm definitely going to try that out, you two. Thank you so much. And never mind me, my ring light has decided that this is the time that it likes to die. So we're just going to keep going. And so this is a perfect transition into another question we've gotten from our viewers, which is about, do you have a vegan wine brand that you would recommend pairing with the vegan Applewood smoked cheddar? So I think we all know that one. It's from the same brand or has similar branding than the cow version, and it's pretty delicious, very smoky. Any suggestions for a good wine pairing?
We don't really talk about brands per se. Like we're not going to say go and pick up a Cave Spring wine for this. I think Jen would she'd probably recommend a varietal and a kind of a region. So, it's going to be more like, go for a Argentinian Malbec, as opposed to a Ontario Riesling kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, what
absolutely.
you can,
I think that might be what our viewer meant.
Okay, amazing.
More than a brand is probably a varietal. Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to take us all the way over to France with this and go to the region of Alsace, which is beautiful. It's further north in France, but it's very sunny and warm, and they have these long sunny falls, and they focus on white wines. And the white wines can get a bit of smokiness. So for example, something like a Gewürztraminer from there, or even a Riesling from there would pair really, really nicely, because even though they are these aromatic varietals, they have a little bit of weight to them. And they can have a bit of smokiness as well. I think it would play off of that smokiness in the cheese.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I've got to ask, this is a question for me. Are there any dishes that you've been cooking for yourselves recently and enjoying a particular varietal pairing with that you'd like to share with us? And perhaps it's from the new book, the Social Herbivore book coming out.
Well, we actually, Jen just made a curry tonight, like a Thai curry, and we threw some hot sauce in
Delicious.
that. And then we had it with this Riesling because this Riesling has a fair bit of sweetness to it. So it was really a perfect pairing with the curry. And that's the good thing about Riesling. A lot of people think of a wine like Riesling and say, oh, I don't like sweet wines, but you can get a very dry Riesling too. And the good thing about it is that if you, however much you up the hot sauce, you can just go for a sweeter Riesling. If you want a less spicy,
Awesome.
you just go for a more dry version, but that's a good one. And we actually do have in the book a Thai curry that we paired with Moscato.
Yeah.
And that
Oh,
was
wow.
that was a shocking pairing to us when we tried it, because neither of us are Moscato drinkers on its own. It's quite a sweet wine with a bit of sparkle.
Certainly.
But you pair that with that Thai curry and it was really good.
Yeah, the other key
Amazing.
things about that matching is that it's lower in alcohol. So one thing you don't want with heat is high alcohol. That's a no-no. So that's why a lot of people go with beers in any Indian cuisine, for example. You know, all of that spice and that heat. So, you know, something with lower alcohol and or sweetness, in the case of Moscato, works really well.
Yeah, you're probably not going to go for like a really strong Malbec with a really spicy curry.
Well, I mean, you know, if that's what you like, then so be it. But my goodness, a reason to purchase a Moscato and branch out into that, because I've tried a few and been like, oh, too sweet for me. But you know what? That's just the beginning. And you know, there's so many extraordinary dishes that it could shine with and really complement. And that's what I found so neat reading through your new book. Is all the different and the thoughtful pairings and perhaps wineries or varietals that I wouldn't often reach for. We all tend to have our go-tos. Well, at least I do. And so I'm really excited that, you know, there's a whole world out there for me. And it's great vegan food, great recipes, you know, just nice and easy to follow and very, very thoughtful pairings. And Jen, I really appreciated how you explained how sort of the pairing worked and how you sort of got there. And that was also an education, right? It's really neat. And something that, you know, the home cook would not necessarily get to experience every day. And so the book is coming out very soon. I'd love if you could share that with the audience and how they can find it as well.
Yeah,
and how they can find you
here, which we are, I'm gonna have to just, there we go. Anyways, so that's the book, and our official launch date is October 5th. And just talking about the pairings, yeah, this is not really a cookbook per se. We don't really refer to it as cookbook. It is more a book on entertaining, because it really is about just creating those special moments. So there are 40 recipes, and Jen has provided 2 pairings for most of them, except for the desserts, because desserts are their kind of own thing, and not a lot of people pair desserts with wines. But we wanted to throw a few in there, because what's a meal without, you know, a cake at the end or something. But she worked really hard on exploring the world in terms of varietals and regions, and really trying to get something from most of the major wine regions. And we did the same with the food. We didn't want this to be, you know, just focused on North American style food. We wanted it to have a little bit of every flavor profile, so that it's sort of like a handbook. You know, it doesn't have 150 recipes, but it has a good number, so that if you make something similar, like if you do a different kind of stir fry that's spicy, you might say, oh, this has some of the same kind of ingredients as that Thai curry that they made, so maybe the wine that Jen picked is going to go with it. So it's really kind of a little guidebook. It's a starter. And there's also tons of information on starting a wine collection, on, you know, properly storing wine, on serving temperatures, on for people who haven't done a lot of plant-based cooking. There's information on veganizing your pantry, because again, this is not also necessarily just for vegans. We're trying to bridge the gap between people who are looking to eat a little bit more plant-based, or
Right.
are just wondering, what can I cook for Thanksgiving because my son's bringing his vegan girlfriend over and I don't know what to cook other than turkey. So we're just
Right.
trying to kind of bridge that gap and provide dishes and meals that everybody can enjoy that just happen to be plant-based.
Absolutely. And I really liked how approachable the pairing was, in the sense that there was sort of a value option and then a splurge option as well. I thought that was great. You know, when it's like, if you really like this combination, you know, try the splurge option. If this is a type of cuisine that you cook often or that you really enjoy, you know, try the splurge. But I loved having that as well. And I think we all three of us agree that, you know, great food is not limited by the absence of animal components. And you know, there's something so soulful for me to cook a beautiful plant-based meal for people that I really care about, and sharing that with them, and just everybody just loving it and thinking that it's a delicious meal and not missing out, but really embracing the experience. And I think that there's a lot of great recipes in here that I'll definitely be trying with friends who are not necessarily vegan, but you know, a delicious meal is a delicious meal. And if you also offer them the enhancement of having a beautiful pairing with it, I mean, my goodness, if you're a foodie, or if you like to eat like many of us do, you're just going to appreciate that so much.